Hi, this is Brian Kim. I want to share with you case number 166 in the Best Way to Do Cataract Surgery series. This is a soft lens, and this is going to be Vivity Extended Depth of Focus Lens Implantation. And so because it's a soft lens, the lens is easy to manipulate. You're able to cut it very easily, again, a cheese wire. So the key is to be able to just disassemble the lens. But when you try to use vacuum or ultrasonic energy, it just breaks and falls apart. And so it really makes no sense to do it this way. So mechanical fracturing really shines. You're going to see efficient lens disassembly with double chop, cross chop. And really, I hope that you do try this technique, and you'll see really how easy it is, and you will no longer struggle to disassemble the soft lens. I'm holding the eye steady with a cotton tip, asking the patient to look straight. Patient has a little bit trouble with the Bell's reflex here. I'm using a cotton tip to steady the eye and using a corneal marker, which helps me to center and size the rexus. Asking the patient to look down, holding the eye steady with a cotton tip, and I'm able to get a nice flat approach with my paracentesis incision. And you want to do this so you can get a nice corneal shelf, which will allow me to achieve a self-sealing incision. I'm asking the patient to look up, which is to the right here, holding the eye steady with a cotton tip, asking the patient not to move, and then similarly making a nice flat approach for the second paracentesis incision. This is intracameral lidocaine, and then some intracameral epinephrine, and then some dispersive viscoelastic to coat the corneal endothelium and flatten the anterior capsule. Again, the patient has a little bit of a Bell's reflex. This is the Orlock technique. I'm rotating the eye downward using the cannula. Again, passive fixation. This is the triplanar corneal incision. I make a vertical groove. The patient has such a strong Bell's reflex, it slipped out. So I'm trying one more time, turning the eye downward. I made the vertical component. I'm going to tunnel through the deep part of the cornea, tunnel, 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 and then I enter. You can see this patient does have that strong Bell's reflex, but everything went quite well. This is the sharp tip Haldane-Perkar forceps. Go in sideways and then rotate vertically. Puncture the center. Again, because it's sharp tip, it's like a cystotome. It cuts so easily, minimal zonular stress with this forceps. I'm able to grab the right side of the tear, going around circumferentially. You can see very well controlled, minimal OVD egress. This forceps has a really nice flat profile. There's not much orlocking or torquing within the incision, very well controlled. Again, this forceps is designed to go through a pretty small incision, a 1.5 millimeter, 1.2 millimeter paracentesis incision. Rub some viscoelastic out, and this is a capsulorhexis hydrodissection technique. I place the cannula under the rexus edge contra-incisionally. Get a nice wave. Turn the tip back up. Decompress on the left side, sweeping under the capsulorhexis edge on that side. Doing the same thing on the right side as well, and the lens begins to spin. Irrigating the surface of the eye, positioning and adjusting the sleeve, lifting the incision with a chopper, going in with irrigation off to minimize Descemet's trauma, removing the surface epinuclear material. You can see the hand is slightly pronated. Slide it under the rexus edge contra-incisionally, point the phaco tip vertically sub-incisionally, fracturing the lens in half, placing the chopper around the right heminucleus, pulling it centrally toward the phaco tip, and it crushes the lens in half again. Again, such a soft lens, but tremendous confidence. When a patient comes in and they have a premium IOL, you want to give them a premium experience. So go to slow motion here. Again, removing the surface epinuclear material, having my hand slightly pronated, leading with the tip, sliding it underneath the rexus edge contra-incisionally, hooking the peripheral lens, rotating the phaco tip vertically sub-incisionally, cutting through the lens because it's soft, cheese wiring, and effectively fracturing the lens completely in half. Pronating my hand once again, sliding it under the rexus edge around the right heminucleus, pulling it centrally toward the phaco tip. Because the phaco tip is deep between the lens pieces, I'm able to fracture the lens completely in half with opposing forces, lifting that first quadrant up with some vacuum, crushing the lens piece between the instruments, and then emulsifying the lens piece. Again, you can see the CDE is 0, so this is purely really with mechanical fracturing forces and then using high vacuum. Lifting the first quadrant up with some vacuum and then crushing it between the instruments and then emulsifying the lens pieces. This is the beauty of the technique. Mechanical fracturing really works the best for these soft lenses. Placing the chopper around the second heminucleus, again, cutting the lens like a cheese wire between the instruments, and then using some vacuum to hold the lens, crushing the lens between the instruments, and then emulsifying the lens. This is the last quadrant, placing the chopper around the lens, didn't want to go, and then I'm using a little bit of vacuum to grab the lens. The endonucleus is able to pull out, crush it into smaller pieces, and then grabbing that last epinuclear piece, and that's the end of the lens removal. So I take the chopper out, push BSS in, take the phaco tip out, and I go in with the I&E handpiece. I start sub-incisionally, always trying to grab the cortical material from anterior to posterior so it peels off in a much more clean manner. You always want to grab anterior, then you'll have a cleaner removal of the cortex. Sweeping side to side, I like to sweep tangentially. I don't like to pull toward the center. You get larger sheets of loosening of the cortex by doing it this way. So remove all the cortical material here, using polish mode now to polish under the rhexis edge, removing all the lens epithelial cells that we see. I spend a lot of time polishing, and part of that is because I want to do the very best for the patient. And I always tell them this, whenever you go into someone's house, you want to leave it the same or better than when you found it. You don't want to leave it a total mess. And so I try to polish all that stuff as much as I can. Pulse into the subincisional space, looking for any potential cortical remnants, and there is none in this case. And then going with cohesive viscoelastic to fill the bag. But I'm going to turn off the irrigation, turn off continuous irrigation, keeping the I&E tip in there while the viscoelastic is going. Once the chamber is formed enough, I go ahead and come out with the I&E. This is my standard technique now. I like to keep the I&E tip in, but turn off the infusion. Because if you have infusion on, it's just going to cause the OVD to burp out of the wounds, which doesn't make any sense. So polishing underneath the rhexis edge with the spatula, with the sweep, first on the left side and then the right side. And then the single piece acrylic Vivity lens is going to go into the capsular bag. Same technique as the standard, soft lenses, soft acrylic lenses. Opens up nice and slow. Go in with irrigation off with the I&E activate irrigation, making sure the haptics come off the optic, rotating the lens, getting underneath the optic and tilting it, rotating it 90 degrees clockwise, removing all the viscoelastic from within the bag. I saw some fine lens material there, go under it again and switch to polish mode and polishing. I really feel like polish mode is just such a great addition to our surgeries now. I have much more confident polishing and removing all this fine lens material. In the past, it was not worth doing that, So, you're worried about with a metal tip you might grab and you take a great case and you have a complication. With polymer tip, I don't really worry about that. And so I do try to shoot for perfect for every case now. People said, oh, the enemy of good is perfect. Well, with the polymer tip, you can try to reach perfection, try to remove all that stuff, don't just leave it there. So I go ahead and switch to visco mode and then hydrate my incision. So again, this is a patient with a soft Vivity lens. Again, you can see how easy it is to execute lens disassembly with double chop, cross chop, using opposing forces to crush the lens completely in half. Again, it acts like a cheese wire. You have great control. You can get around the lens. There's no zonular stress because the lens is so soft. As you try to manipulate the lens, it just kind of crumbles around you. It's more like made of a jelly, soft material. So you're not pushing down on the zonules, stretching the zonules, doing anything of the sort. Really, those are more issues when you're dealing with dense lenses that you have to be worried about. But with soft lenses, it's super easy. You can get the instruments around the lens piece so easily, cheese wire through the lens with double chop, cross chop, very effectively pull pieces up out of the bag, very controlled, very easy, and really a no fuss way. If you go after pieces with vacuum, you're just running into trouble. If you try to sculpt a soft lens, you're just going to run into trouble. It's just I mean, you can eventually get it out, but it's just painful to see people doing that. Don't sculpt soft lenses. Don't try to grab soft lenses with the phaco tip. It's just going to crumble in your hands. But if you use opposing forces, get around the lens from either side, crush it, it's a cheese wire. It's super easy. People use MyLoops, and I mean, I understand the concept of MyLoop, but this is essentially a MyLoop, but without all the instrumentation, without the risk of having that lasso inside the eye. You can just use your instruments. It's really not that hard. This is really the easiest way and the most confident way, in my opinion, to disassemble the soft lens. And again, you saw this Vivity lens at the end. It has that little small round area in the middle. And you ask the patient to look straight at the light and be able to center the lens beautifully. And this patient was very happy with her result. Not only the surgery, but also the uncorrected visual acuity and range of vision. So I hope this was helpful to you. And I thank you for your attention.